And now, two guys who survived running with scissors, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 19 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
In today's episode, we disappear into a crowd. You are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound.
So, Aaron, have you bought a straw hat and overalls yet? Because from what I saw last time I drove by the business, you have 4 rabbits and 8 chickens.
Yes. I swore I was not going to do chickens, but as the article that will come out tomorrow explains, my mother kind of guilted me into chickens a little bit. I was going to hold off probably 6 months before I started messing with chickens, and but my mother explained to me that she wanted some chickens, and she wanted these particular kinds of chickens that produce a particular kind of egg. I know I'm being very vague, and I'm just holding it off. You'll have to read the article tomorrow about the shenanigans with these chickens. But we now have 8 chickens. We started with 4, and Sunday morning I drove out to Bowlin Bunny Ranch, and Kathy was nice enough to, on her most recent excursion to wherever it is she goes to get animals besides rabbits, she picked me up another 4 chickens. So
you've got a little mini farm running now.
We now have the 3F,
yes,
or the triple F, which is the Frankel Funny Farm. So we have 8 chickens and 4 rabbits, and then hopefully around December we'll have a large batch of rabbits, and so we can really start the breeding program there. But for now, yeah, the chickens are running around and everything, and that's actually kind of what happened to last week's show. Building a chicken coop took a little longer than I thought it would, and part of that was due to the heat exhaustion and dehydration I wound up with. Yeah, it's a little warm here right now.
Yeah, I was at the shooting range this morning, and my car told me it was 102 degrees.
Yeah, it's and not having had rain in quite some time, it's not
dry, dusty, and somehow humid.
Yeah,
I don't. It's dry and humid. Yes, I know that's a complete contradiction, but it really is.
I think the issue we're having is that for us, for Houstonians, it's dry because it's under 90% humidity, but it is still actually humid because I think it's still sitting at like 78% humidity.
We were talking about it earlier. Feels like in a lot of places in the country at night it has the chance to cool down. In humid, in Houston, in Houston. You have that humidity blanket that snuggles you so tight, and it never cools down. It just gets dark.
Yes. And wet.
Yeah, dark and wet. It's not good. So when are you getting a goat?
Yeah, that's been a regular ongoing joke now, because as we've cleared out part of what it was a large space at my business that we were not using, and it's a good... I want to say 2,500 square feet is kind of, this is just kind of a swag, a wild ass guess. But I'm guessing we have about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet with that space. And there's half of the space has now been cleared out and is going completely unused. So I keep joking about putting goats in it, but I think for now, certainly not. And I don't really drink that much milk, and I don't eat cheese, so...
I give you like 3 weeks. Your mom's gonna ask for cheese.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I'll help make cheese. You can't buy unpasteurized cheese in the States, at least not legally, unless you know people.
Not legally. They'll, even the Amish, they'll come arrest you.
They'll actually come after you. Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, it's like, I know I'm eating unpasteurized cheese. Let me put myself at risk.
Yes. So moving on to the meat of today's show, which is the concept of gray. Gray gets not very much attention in the survival community, It gets talked about a little bit, and it's kind of like when you see it come up, all of a sudden you'll see a heated debate start, and it's usually within the forums.
Yeah, and it normally relates, and I know, depending which form you're looking at, gray tends to lean towards the tactical people talking. And while you see preppers talking about it too, we're going to put a slightly different spin on how to approach it.
Well, I think what we're going to do today is actually try to really define for people what the concept is,
Yep.
how it's applicable. Because the problem with gray is what's applicable to, say, Jonathan and I is not applicable to somebody that's trying to do undercover work or somebody that is doing private contractor work
Right,
overseas.
which is a lot of times where you'll see the conversations go. It'll always be, well, when I was a private contractor in Afghanistan, this is what I did to be gray. Well, that's not going to necessarily work in Houston, Texas, or Dallas, or Los Angeles.
No, and that is the problem with the conversation that people have about it, is that they get wrapped up into what gray is applicable to them and not the general concept of gray,
So
or
maybe-
not for civilian gray.
Let's talk about what gray is, because we've been kind of going on about being gray.
Yes.
But let's give them a little bit of a definition of what is gray, Aaron.
So to me, gray, simply put, is blending in and not attracting attention to the fact that you may be a survivalist, or that you may enjoy playing with guns and knives, or any of those things that sets you out of, or we'll use the sheep terminology, sets you apart from the normal everyday sheep as far as the sheep are concerned. And I know some people are sensitive about the term sheep, but get over it. It is what it is. It's there for a reason.
And I add one little thing to that, which is that in addition to blending in is very specific to you. We talk a lot about your community, your health, and your intelligence, but look at that community aspect. Your community doesn't necessarily mean Houston, Texas. Community is the people you interact with and engage with on a day-to-day basis. And if you've been dressing a certain way for the last 10 years, I mean, okay, you're a computer programmer, you wear khakis and a polo every single day, that's gray for you. Khakis and a polo. In other words, just because you're starting to do prep, don't throw on a tactical shirt with some 511 pants.
Don't wear the tactical tuxedo.
Right. No tactical tuxedos. Stick with what you're comfortable in. And that allows you to be gray.
Yeah, it's gray in your personal appearance is, and now there's some minutia in here that we'll slip into in a second, but there's no reason, because you get into prep, that you need to change who you are, the basics of who you are.
Right.
And if you like dressing a certain way, then keep dressing that certain way. You know, there's a lot of people will talk on forums and stuff, and here's where we're slipping into the minutia, but people will talk about the best shirt to wear for concealed handguns, and this is the easiest example we can give of it. But people are, oh yeah, I'll wear this 511 shirt, or I'll wear this Hawaiian shirt, or I'll wear this boxy cut shirt. For the last, I think it's about 2 years, I've been doing an experiment, and I wear a, I think they call it, Polo calls it
the fitted cut,
yeah, it's a fitted, not a douchebag fitted,
custom,
but
I think is what they call
the
it.
custom fit is what they call it, and it's a more athletic, more lean, it's a more narrow waisted shirt. But it's a polo style shirt, and I don't carry a large gun, but I don't carry a small gun either. I carry a SIG 229, and it is not the easiest gun in the world to conceal, but it conceals well enough for the vast majority of people that are looking at me. If I walk into a restaurant or something, somebody who is looking for bulges in people's shirt will see it. Most likely, at some point. People who are not looking, who are 99% of the population, will not see it. It will still fall under that realm of it is concealed. We've been on road trips. We've traveled all over the country. And legally, well, there was that one time that we didn't know what we didn't know
Right.
we were
We were
breaking
unaware,
law.
and we just didn't know.
It happened. But we weren't in that city for very long. So, but the point was, so for 2 years, I've walked around not terribly worried about how well concealed I am. And I have not had a single issue ever.
But talking about how this is, it's, being gray is a very personal thing.
Yes.
I also carry pretty much every day for the last 2 years. And what I can say is, when it's cooler weather, I actually carry a Browning High Power, which is about, for those of you who don't know the Browning High Power, think of a full-size 1911. Pretty much the same size. But when it starts getting hot like it is now, I actually carry a Smith & Wesson Model 642, which is a snub-nose 38. And sometimes I carry it in my waistband, sometimes I carry it in my pocket. For me, I could probably still conceal the high power in what I'm wearing, but it becomes a comfort issue. I'm more comfortable when I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt in having something in my pocket than I am having something on my waist. So for me, to stay gray, it's partly a mindset too, right? So if you're thinking that you're not showing off to the world, then most likely you're probably not. But if you keep being very self-conscious about it, you're going to be touching your gun or reaching for it and making sure it's not showing, checking it out in mirrors. So to stay gray, you have to actually mentally believe that you're also gray.
And as far as we were talking a bit about clothing choices and the whole how we got into the topic of concealed carry, which is don't alter who you already are in your personal appearance to
Neither one of us changed our clothing.
No,
we both kept the clothing pretty identical, actually.
Back in the late 90s, or I think it was the late 90s when Texas passed concealed carry. I did actually change and start wearing boxier shirts and stuff. And I did that for a while, but really in the last few years, I've kind of given up on that. And I'm like, and after doing it for 2 years, I can tell you there's no reason for me to have to adapt. Now, occasionally, if I'm wearing a suit or something like that, I will change out the firearm that I carry so that I'm not bulging. But that's the fine line of going to obvious. So the idea is people that are in the know and people that are looking for somebody like that there's very little you can do to keep yourself 100% gray 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. If somebody is looking for a specific person, a specific type of person, and they're trained, they're going to see that person. It's like the old thing about, criminals can usually spot a cop because the way they carry themselves, because of, this is barring like real undercover cops that have actually put effort into it, but there's tells, there's things.
Even the shoes they wear.
Yes. So, and besides personal appearance, there's also what comes out of your mouth. Are you constantly evangelizing survival and being prepared? It's one thing to talk about it, and it's one thing to tell people that you do spend some time and you have concern with your personal safety and things like that. It's quite another to shout from the rooftops that you're a survivalist.
Right, and this is an interesting discussion, too, because I think a lot of people are going to come back at us and say, well, Aaron and Jonathan, you told us this was about community, and we want to make sure everybody's prepared. And, well, yes and no. It is about your community, but your community, again, goes back to your community does include your neighbors, but it really is your social circle. It's the people who are close to you. You build your own personal community.
And there's circles. There's different circles, which are different levels of closeness, how tightly and how much of yourself you expose to the people of different circle, your ever expanding circle.
And almost think of it, I hate to put it in these terms, but almost think of it like a belief system or a religion system. We're telling you don't proselytize. That's really what we're saying. Don't go
you can do a soft sell, which is what we do, which is we'll talk about it, and if somebody shows interest, then we'll get into the conversation with them.
Right, but we're not pushing it. We're not trying to push it upon them without being asked about it. We might be talking about it amongst ourselves, and then somebody will say, oh, that sounds interesting. And I think that's more or less what you mean by the soft sell, which is we're not knocking on doors with a survival manual.
maybe we should. Maybe we should. Really pump up the listenership of the show.
In full on, tactical tuxedos.
Oh yeah. Every door we've got to be full on. They've got to be confused about whether or not we're there to sell them something or break down their door and issue them some sort of citation.
Exactly. That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it is. Well, we've been having those. Well, we're not even going to get into that rant today about
proselytizing preppers scares me.
We'd have to get bikes and of course white and black. I'm sorry, I'm not making fun of anybody's religion or not meaning to, but so one thing to talk about it, and it's one thing to soft sell, and kind of like think it's quite another to stand around in someplace and tell everyone that the apocalypse is coming
Right.
and the zombies are on their way.
And you have 3 years worth of MREs in your bathroom.
Yes, yes. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were giving me a tip on somebody really interesting to interview. And man, this person started telling me every single last detail about all the stuff that this person they thought I should interview had, and where it was even. And I was just like, oh my God. I mean, I'm all for being honest with who I am, and if somebody asks, yeah, I'll say I'm a survivalist, and I don't hide it. But at the same time, I don't say, yeah, and I've got this here and I've got there, which is a good time to bring up the irony of this conversation. Yes, we are fully aware of the irony of us having a conversation about operational security and being quiet about things, and here we are having a show. We're pretty easy to find all over the internet and whatever else. There is a certain level of operational security that we have to give up in order to have this show.
Right, we're okay with that. You know our names. You know we live in Houston. Finding us wouldn't be too tough. But we give up that anonymity to talk about it. It's something we've chosen to do. But if you're just out there trying to live your life and make sure you're prepared for the future, you probably don't want to give up those things. If you do, great, go for it. But if you want to stay a little bit more anonymous in what you're doing, then this is the kind of show you want to listen to, and you want to be a little bit more gray about everything. And it extends beyond just the concealed carry thing. It extends to, we talked about bug out bags, we talked about everyday carry bags, all the way out to Aaron's urban farm is not exactly a glaring urban farm, in where it is in his build or around his building. It's not just out there for the world to see.
No, it's pretty well hidden. I mean,
Yeah.
But
it's not
you're
overly
looking
hidden.
for it,
It also doesn't go out of its way to be hidden. So it's like I said, it's gray. It's not blacked out. It's gray. It fits in the area. He's also, the way you chose animals was you were going for animals that didn't make a lot of noise, weren't overly large.
Yes.
Weren't requiring a lot of care of you coming in and out.
Yeah, and where I placed the animal, a neighboring building has a cooling tower that puts off a constant 75 decibel noise. So even if the animals made small noises, those noises are very well masked. You can barely even hear each other talk when you're back there. But
right now it's 4 deaf bunnies and 8 deaf chickens. But besides that, it's fantastic.
So being gray in your personal appearance, and then this extends and in your speech and stuff. Well, this now we can start talking about in your vehicle. Now, if you like jacked up trucks with snorkels and stuff, like our buddy Jason, which he actually doesn't have that for survival, he has that because, well, he's a redneck.
But it actually does fit into who he is.
It makes perfect sense.
When you start talking to Jason and you see his truck, you're like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you're the guy who for your entire life drove a sports car and then one day you show up with a jacked up monster truck with a snorkel on it, people are going to start wondering.
Yeah. And there's we all want to take pride in the organizations and things that we support. And maybe it's time to consider not plastering the back of, or front for that matter, of your vehicle with different, with your NRA stickers and everything else. Which, and here's, we can kind of divert off for a second and talk about taking things to extremes. I hear the conversation all the time. Well, if you got an NRA sticker on your car, that just tells somebody you've got guns in the car. I personally, now this is just an opinion. I don't believe that.
I don't either.
I'm not going to really say it really says one thing one way or another about you. I mean, it definitely says something about you, but whether or not it says there's fun stuff in your car, I personally, I think it's a terrible idea to leave firearms in an unattended vehicle anyway. But I think it broadcasts to the world, maybe more than you want everyone to know, about your affiliations and political leanings and everything else. That's not to say that you shouldn't show your support, but maybe your vehicle does not need to be a billboard, a moving billboard for every single thing you believe in.
In a world where people are so, and I'm not a fan of the concept of being overly sensitive to everything. When people are so sensitive to everything going on around them, it is best to just kind of blend in and be gray for a lot of things.
Mhm.
I'm not telling you not to go support the NRA. I am actually an NRA member.
Yeah.
They're not my favorite gun organization in the world, but they happen to be the best gun lobby we've got.
Yeah.
So I'm a member of that. I don't have a big NRA sticker anywhere, actually. But then again, you know what? I'm a huge fan of Apple products, and I haven't put an Apple sticker on my car either. So, I mean,
Yes.
this is kind of just the way I go, which is I happen to like certain things. We're sharing that with all of you because we consider everyone listening to be part of our community.
Mm-hmm.
So we're okay sharing those things with you. I'll tell you what kind of gear I like. But I learned a long time ago that sharing what you do and do not like with people who don't care is kind of useless.
It's more than useless. It's a good way to just irritate the crap out of people for no
irritates other
good reason.
and it wastes energy. It's just a waste of time and energy on
Yeah.
your part. If I'm asked for an opinion, I'll give it to people. But honestly, I've kind of gotten to a point in my own life, and this goes just towards mental health. I've gotten to a point in my own life where it's like, yeah, I'll give you my opinion, but I don't care whether you choose to take it or not anymore, because if you ask, well, then it becomes your option to take it or not. But if you don't ask, I'm not even going to give it. Unless you're a close friend, and then, I'm more than happy to tell you what to do.
And then you're very opinionated,
Then
SOB.
I'm extremely opinionated.
So as long as we're on the topic of cars, this is also the time to talk about, we talked about in our bags episode, we talked about having bag stuff. Now, if you look at my vehicle at this exact moment in time, you're going to think the back of my truck is prepared for the apocalypse. And that's because, well, at the exact moment, I'm being lazy and not taking a bunch of camping stuff out of the back of my
oddly,
truck.
for hiding bodies. It must be, I think it's the shovel and the dirt you have in the back. But,
Yeah. Well, I wanted it to look like I was hiding bodies and not shoveling chicken poop.
Okay.
So
That's fair.
I was being gray with my urban farm.
That's fair.
But at the moment, I have a ton of junk in the back of my truck that I just need to get out of the back of it. But usually, I try to have it a little more subdued. Which I think bags in general should never be left out in plain view. But there are lots of little nooks and crannies in a car that you can very easily put your car bag away.
Right. And if you're going to have a bag that has some expensive first aid kit equipment in it and a few other items we've talked about, none of which are particularly cheap, they're all good things to have.
Yeah.
But when you start preparing, you end up buying some goods that are higher quality because, well, these are the goods that you're going to potentially use to save yourself. So if it's your life on the line or your health on the line, spend the money, buy the good product. These aren't product you want out visible to the world to see so that somebody can say, oh, I'd like that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's make your car uninteresting, and by not leaving a bunch of survival stuff out. So just the same way as you don't broadcast to the world who you are and what you have, and have your car be a driving billboard, as we said a little while ago.
If you own a Sony TV, you usually don't put a big Sony sticker on all your exterior facing windows.
No, that would, it's the same concept. That would be
Right.
just a bad idea.
Exactly.
And so moving on to, since we brought up home, let's talk about having a gray home for a minute. There you can do video surveillance on the outside of your home. You can do lots of lights, which we recommend and was recommended by Dan Blackford in an earlier episode. And that stuff is pretty well good and normal. But to have the giant NRA sticker somewhere on your front door, unnecessary. That I think would probably invite, because the place you're most likely to keep firearms is
Yeah, I would
in
agree
your
with that.
home.
And then it even extends, though, so you have generators.
Yes.
You're worried about something like a hurricane or some other disaster occurring, so you've got your generators. Keep them reasonably well hidden. I mean, they're just not things we heard in an earlier episode. You're not going to just steal a generator because it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case. That's not the issue. It's just you don't want to open up your home as, oh, that's the guy who has power.
Yes. And it's there's a whole train of thought here we can follow with this, which is, you will need to have, if you have a automatic start, what's the word I'm looking for here? The in place, built in.
Oh yeah, the automatic switchover natural gas generators.
Yeah, those where it's always in place, and they kind of look like an air conditioner. Well, if you have one, do it. They're actually fairly quiet. The newer, better ones are fairly quiet, and even the new ones that Bert is now selling are really quiet. But you can still put up some sort of hedge or some kind of barrier to help kind of dampen that sound a little more.
And blocking it from street view.
Yeah.
Or if you have the portable generators, like I still do, because I did buy them right after Ike, and I have not put in a fixed generator in my house, although I'd love to.
Yeah, they're just they are. We fully admit they are a little pricey.
They're a little pricey, but they are fantastic. As soon as I can put one in, save up enough to do it, I will be. But for your portable generators, keep them in your backyard. Again, don't do something stupid like putting them in your house. That's a bad idea.
Really, really bad idea.
That can kill you. But put them in your backyard and lock your backyard, because we did not see a huge crime spike in Houston after Ike.
We didn't see any kind of crime spike at all.
Exactly. The community here really did a great job of looking out for each other. People banded together, communities banded together and helped each other. So I actually think if you want to look at a model of how things worked out really well in a disaster, that was a great example.
Yeah, Houston does tend to be a really great example of how people don't go crazy in a disaster.
But even in that kind of environment, people get tempted. And I will tell you, one of the areas we did see crime increase was people stealing generators.
Yeah.
Because people would put a generator in a convenient location, maybe the front of their house, it would be running all night. Well, they do make noise. Even the quiet ones make noise. And people would drive by and say, oh, look, there's a generator in that guy's driveway. And in the morning, there would be no generator in that guy's driveway. So people do get tempted, and bad things happen when people get tempted. Temptation tends to win over in a big group. So enough cars drive by, somebody's going to do something bad. So just being gray is keeping that generator in your backyard. Keep your fence closed. Close the gate, lock it. Especially at night when you have something that's a valuable piece of equipment that is helping you maintain a lifestyle in a disaster that other people might want.
And as long as we're still on the exterior of the house, we can talk about gardens and urban farms and stuff like that for a minute. You'll see on forums and stuff, people talk a lot about, oh, well, if you have a garden, it makes you a target and da-da-da-da-da. I will tell you now, if things get so bad that your garden makes you a target, just being above ground and amongst the living,
exactly,
you are a target.
Yeah,
you obviously have food somewhere. You obviously have supplies somewhere. You are a target. If things are that bad, which is not really a topic we ever
we don't really
go into. It's unnecessary,
and it's not an area we think things are going. So it's not going to get to that level. The garden is for your own use. It's for you to supplement and not have to spend money in other areas. It's a way for you to live better.
Yeah, and it's more self-sufficiency and independence from whatever you want to be independent of.
Market trends would be a great example.
Yeah, there you go. Inflation, pesticides, whatever you feel.
You're not doing it because the zombie apocalypse is coming.
Well, I am.
Well,
I mean,
you're different.
Well, I like zombies and bunnies and chickens, apparently.
It's zombie bunnies that you have to worry about.
Well, that is our mascot and logo.
Exactly.
So, but with your garden, there are things that you can do to make it gray. You can practice permaculture, and you can do companion planting. You can mix things. So you wind up with more of a Victorian-style garden. Actually, I'm not even sure I'm using the right... I think it was Victorian that had more disorganized, kind of just natural...
Overall, I know what you're talking about. It looks like a backyard garden.
Yeah, it looks like a normal landscaping. It doesn't necessarily look... It's not these neat, tidy little rows with chicken wire all over everything. It's a yard with landscaping. It just happens to be edible landscaping. Now, tomatoes and stuff will stand out a little bit. But
that's not unusual for people to have.
No, people have that all the time.
People have gardens, and it is not out of the ordinary to have one. Now, when you start building in things like chickens and rabbits, I think then people start looking, and then you really have to start thinking in terms of gray then as what fits into my neighborhood and isn't going to bother my neighbors.
Yeah, and with the chickens, I made a conscious decision, because I wasn't looking at the laws first, to not get a rooster, even though I really would like a rooster for breeding purposes, and since it's not next door to my house, I don't have to listen to it, and it's in an industrial area. rooster wouldn't have been a big deal, but it would have drawn attention
Right.
to that there's stuff in there. And I did recently find out, and there'll be a link to it in the article for anybody in our area interested in chickens or any kind of livestock. Houston apparently has very liberal laws around it. You can keep up to 30 chickens in your yard as long as they're 100 feet from your neighbor.
Yeah, Texas in general has pretty good laws when it comes to a lot of this.
Yeah.
And Houston having no zoning.
Yeah.
Now we have deed restrictions, but we don't have zoning. Is particularly friendly to a lot of these kinds of things.
Yeah, well, it's friendly to just about everything
Yeah,
as long
exactly.
as But the idea here is that maybe you have one or two chickens or something, or maybe you have your chicken coop look like a dog house, whatever. You look for ways to kind of subdue things. Now, moving on into your house, we had Jennifer and I. Another couple came over and we were meeting up and then we were going to go have dinner and they walked into our kitchen. Well, in our kitchen, we live in a 1930s bungalow home. There is no pantry. There's hardly even any closets that are even worth mentioning in the home. So, but instead of having a pantry, we have a big rolling shelf in our kitchen. And yeah, it looks like we just raided Costco. But here's a way of, even if something is not gray, turning it gray. Somebody said, I think it was the boyfriend, turned and said, "Wow, you guys are look like those extreme couponers or whatever the show was." And I said, "Well, actually, we don't have a pantry, so you just happen to see our pantry out in the open because we have a big Metro rack with everything on it." And that was partly true and partly not true. So it's, in your conversations, there's a way of phrasing things that make them gray. And as soon as I said it, he was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, all right." And we moved on to,
It allowed
let's
you
go
to
eat.
avoid a potentially not necessarily uncomfortable for you, but conversation that could have taken a lot longer than you wanted it to,
Yeah,
and been focused on something that was not going to be the direction your evening was supposed to take.
right. So moving on beyond that, it's, don't leave a million and one survival books laying on, which I'm a little guilty of, but I'm actually in the process of moving my library. And so maybe not leaving all of that stuff laying around. And, maybe when people come over, you're not sitting around cleaning a gun. Not that I think any of you are doing that.
I do that all the time.
Well, I was doing that earlier when you showed up to the
exactly.
studio, but it would just happen to be time and place. And this is the Rabbit Hole Studio, so people come here expecting for strange tactical stuff, which this room is full of strange tactical stuff.
There's a rifle propped up against the wall. Yeah.
It's a 22.
Oh no, I know.
It's actually, that is my Appleseed Liberty rifle for listeners that is
That's
propped
right.
up against the
The
wall.
toolkit that I brought up to the office today is full of gun cleaning equipment. So yeah.
And so up here, there's, a shooting mat laying out, and there's a bunch of random product here that is awfully tactical that we're in the process of reviewing, and some other stuff out. But yeah, here's not gray. My house is very gray. I don't leave anything laying out. One, it's messy and it would be completely unnecessary. And there's no posters up. There's nothing that screams survivalist. There's nothing that really says anything more about me than this is a normal home. This is a guy and a girl living, and their tactical Weimaraner alert system that just doesn't look that tactical because, well, he's like a million years old and sleeping most of the time.
Well, and I just thought of something, and I don't want anybody to think we're having this conversation because there's anything wrong with what all of us are doing, because all of us are, and it's us included.
No,
we're all prepping.
we're very proud of what we
There's
do.
a couple of reasons we're having this conversation right now, especially. I think it's kind of timely in the sense that we just had that whole group that was convinced the end of the world was going to happen about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a lot of the 2012 preppers, which, again, that's an extreme view of the universe. So with that kind of every now and then peeking its head in the media, people tend to look over at somebody who's prepping and not think in terms of all the things that really do happen regularly.
Mm-hmm.
They think, oh, that guy's prepping for 2012, or that guy's prepping because he thought that, the world was going to end 2 weeks ago. And he's just waiting for, the real shit hits the fan scenario to occur.
Yeah.
And that does become a very odd conversation to have with somebody. And it just makes them have a very weird view of you, and then you don't want your neighbors thinking of you as that weird guy who lives over there. So that's one of the reasons. It's just a timely point in American history to
Yeah.
have this conversation.
And I think the second point to this is in disasters, if things, and we're not talking zombie apocalypse here, but in some sort of disaster, now all of a sudden you are the pantry for your neighborhood. Now, we're
Right.
not saying you shouldn't open your heart and maybe your food stores a little bit in times of real need.
For the excess you have, again, if you've prepared beyond where you need to and it's a hurricane and you think you'll be without power for 2 weeks, but you have 3 months worth of food
Yeah.
and you want to share, again, this is all choice. We're not telling you have to. We're just saying that if you want to be that person, you can. But what we're saying is you shouldn't be forced into it.
Right. It shouldn't be people trying to guilt you into
Right.
it, people banging at your door, whatever the case may be. But by having some operational security in how you store and how your home looks from the inside, because we do have people, we're I hope you're sociable people, not living in the mountains somewhere, or if you are living in the mountains somewhere, I hope you're still sociable with your
We're
neighbors
an
and
urban
stuff.
survival show.
But we are an urban survival show, so you're going to have people over to your house. You're going to have friends. You're going to have family. You're going to have whatever. And they, even people that not really meaning to, that just don't have any real sense, that haven't what we often like to call woken up to the fact that bad things do happen sometimes. It's just a strange view that now there are conversations you can have and you can flip the mentality and you have the opportunity to socially engineer that person and pique their interest in it. But that's not a topic for today. That's a topic for another show. But for the here and now, when you're not prepared to have that conversation or just flat don't want to have that conversation, don't give people ammunition to have that conversation, to put you in that spot to...
Right, and that spot usually comes about as, oh, look how prepared you are. Now I know where to come when the hurricane comes.
Yes, if I hear that from one more person, I'm not a violent person. I'm really not, but I want to punch the next person in the forehead that says that.
Right, and that's what we're trying to help you avoid. It's more of that uncomfortable situation than anything else. We don't believe, again, I just want to point out, we don't think there's anything wrong with this. We do it, this is the lifestyle we live. And we actually, most of the people who know us, outside the people who know us really well, we're just urbanites.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't think anybody would venture to guess that either one of us preps or does the kinds of things we talk about on the show. They just know us as the urbanites. We go out and we have fun on weekends. We go out during the week with friends. We have couples nights at nice restaurants. We're just normal guys.
And I think for the only thing they do, even the outer circles of our friendships that maybe don't know that we're into prep and stuff, they still know that, we go camping a lot,
Right.
and that, we go shooting quite a bit, and that we have these hobbies, and that's who we
Right.
are.
It's not an intentional hiding it. It's also just not intentionally throwing it in their face either.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be thrown in people's face. So it's this whole, in your person, in your speech, in your day-to-day life, in your home, it's just avoiding the conversation by keeping things subtle. And here's where something that makes your life better today can make your life better also, or most certainly will probably make your life better if something truly major ever does happen. Because now, at this point, if this is something you practice, if this is a lifestyle for you of maintaining everything as being gray, now it's not a mode you have to slip into if something really traumatic does happen. And you're not forced into situations or have situations forced upon you that you don't really want to be in, that I don't think anybody would ever want to be in. So to circle back, and let's talk a little bit more about conversations. There's always a way to spend things. Like we talked about a few minutes ago when Jennifer and I had another couple come into our home, we spun the conversation. It's pretty easy to do. Somebody says, "Why do you have all this stuff?" You can tell them whatever you want. Oh, we're really trying to watch our finances, so we're buying a little more in bulk these days. That is a perfectly plausible explanation these days for why anybody would do anything. The economy's terrible. People are trying to save money. Totally reasonable. And there's a ton of other things you can say like that. Like the one I said, well, we don't have a pantry, a proper pantry, so all of our stuff is kind of out in the open.
Right, and you know your own situation best. So just think of the answers. And they're going to make sense because you don't necessarily have it because the end of the world is coming. You have it for all kinds of reasons, and it's to improve your life and whatever it might be. But your answer could actually be, yeah, I was clipping coupons, and this is the best way to save money.
Yeah. And concern is one thing. And we talked about this a little while ago, but and we all want to spread the message, but let somebody else be the first to start the conversation. You don't need to proselytize. It's one thing to talk about it and to have your family and maybe your truly tight friends and to show concern with them over a topic. And people in the conversation of talking about gray, people within the community often really overreact and worry about people knowing that they're in prep or that they're survivalists and stuff. Well, it's funny to often hear people's reaction to it. There's the initial reaction that, oh my God, you're crazy and you think the world is coming to an end. And we've talked throughout several episodes about that our personal belief is that the world is not coming to an end, that maybe bad times are ahead, rough times even, but it's about making your life better today. And there's a TV show on, and I'm going to preface this all now with I do watch him. Some of you may not watch him. Some of you may not like him. Some of you may really hate him. That's not part of the conversation, so don't get wrapped up when I say who this is. But Glenn Beck has a really great expression he's been using lately, which is a simple question. Does this make my life better or worse? Well, you can apply that to conversations when you're talking about prep with people that maybe you wind up in that conversation with. And if somebody says anything about it, it's easy to say, well, you know what? It makes my life better in the here and now by storing a little extra, by being out of debt and all these things. Whether things go bad or not, that makes my life better today, not worse in any way. And I've gotten that conversation when people close to me that aren't in prep or aren't survivalists say, why are you doing this rabbit thing? Why do you have chicken thing? Well, you know what? We're eating more organically. Everybody understands that these days because everybody's worried about eating more organically. And you can even talk about, well, for me, the conversation I have is, well, I want to be more in touch with where my food comes from. It's just kind of a hobby, and it's a philosophical thing.
Which, by the way, is a really easy conversation to have right now. For those of you who haven't read it, Mark Zuckerberg, who is the CEO of Facebook, has actually made a commitment to himself, and he's following through with it, that he is only eating what he kills. So he is actually, and this is not a joke or anything else, this is something he's really doing. You can think he's as eccentric as you want or anything else, but the reality is this is actually becoming trendy. Believe it or not, what all of us have known is a good idea is starting to become trendy. And it's not just the eating what you kill part, but it's the being prepared part. There are tons of TV shows about being prepared for X, Y, and Z disaster, all the way to the latest one, which is about being prepared for a alien invasion. But and we take some of these things as people tend to take these things as serious, but the reality is, just like Aaron's written about many times on the website, a lot of these things are just metaphors for being prepared for everyday disasters.
And that's where the distinction for a lot of people needs to be made, that it is that these TV shows and stuff like that, and I wrote a whole article on how zombies are a metaphor, and we love to joke about zombies around here, but it's this stuff is starting to really slip into mainstream. Even Neil Strauss was on one of the first news reports I'd ever seen where they didn't make him look like a complete nut, that he was prepared.
Right, and it's like I said, nobody's talking about Mark Zuckerberg as insane.
Well, I think they are, but probably not for that reason.
I think more eccentric.
Yeah.
But, the fact that this is a guy who lives in the San Francisco area and has now made a actual personal decision that fits really well in line with what a lot of preppers think about. Now, I'm not telling all of you to only eat what you kill. You can go to the grocery store and buy anything you want. But the concept of being in touch with your food and having your food source nearby and all of that fits in.
And you can talk about it from, we talked about organic. It's just, you can talk, if you're taking it to where I'm kind of taking it right now,
Right.
which is just, it's a healthier way to live. And it really is. And it goes back to does this make my life better or worse? Yeah, I create a little more work for myself, but honestly, it's work I'm really enjoying.
Right, and I know we're a little bit we're not all over the place, but we're kind of talking about this in a different way than you probably normally hear about it. But the way to think about this is a gray conversation.
Yes.
You're taking the conversation gray. You're not denying what you do. You're actually talking about what you do. You're just talking about it in a way that's acceptable to the social community around you at that time. So if it is a group of your urban friends who aren't all that into prep, the way to make the conversation gray is you're eating organic. You're eating local and
Yes.
organic. I mean, nobody's going to argue with that. I mean, just go over to Whole Foods. That's the whole concept.
Yes. And people are paying a lot of money to go do it.
Exactly. You're doing it on the cheap.
We'll get into the conversation as far as, here's an example of one of the reasons for kind of remaining a little gray in your preps and everything else. Well, when the shit hits the fan, I'll just come to your house.
Right.
And we joked about it a little earlier that I'm going to punch somebody, the next person that says it to me, in the head. Now, there's a distinction here. There are, extremely close family and immediate family, I should say, and extremely close friends. Yeah, you get to, at least for us, we've kind of come to the point where some people just don't get it. And some people they're just not going to do it. And so we prep a little bit more for them.
The way I look at it is there are people that you have decided you have a personal responsibility for. And for those people, be prepared. Be prepared for them as well if you've decided that they're part of your circle of responsibility.
Yeah. And I'll give a personal story here, which is recently, and it was actually the same Neil Strauss interview that my mom happened to catch. And Neil and I had a brief email, funny exchange about how mothers just never take anything their kids do seriously until somebody else says it. Well, immediately after that, she kind of woke up to the idea, and it was like, oh, wait, this isn't just some crazy hobby my son has. Maybe I really should be concerned about this. And so all of a sudden she starts getting into it, and we start having these conversations that were a little funny because it's, I'm looking at basically the stuff that was coming out of her mouth was the same kind of extreme things that were coming out of our mouths a few years ago, where we even joked about trying to buy a place in St. Kitts or trying to figure out how to come up with the money to buy a dual
place on an
citizenship,
island so we could have dual citizen. All the same things Neil was going through, or the things we were going through, and that a lot of you are probably either have gone through, will go through, or are going through currently.
Yes, and so that is a situation where now I can have a full conversation with somebody, but it's a person that, I guess, really circling back to it, as far as prepping for people that don't prep. Well, before that moment of inspiration for her, I had already been preparing for them, and I'd even been kind of caching a few things at their house in the event, even though they're pretty close by, they're still in Houston standards on the other side of downtown from me. So I had been, leaving a few things here and there at their house. So if something did happen and I couldn't get to them, they would have the basic necessary tools they would need to take care of themselves in that kind of situation. So it's still about being gray. When I dropped those things off, it was, well, it is hurricane season time, and I am a CERT member, and so these are the basic things you need for hurricanes. And while they're applicable to most other disasters, that was how the conversation initially went. But now I can have a different conversation that's more survivalist, we'll call it.
Right.
So it really is, in your day-to-day conversations and your personal appearance and everything else, we're not telling you to hide who you are. We're just saying, maybe downplay it.
Right, and I know that this show, we talk a lot about a few things, and we were a little bit light on examples of actual gray items. But one of the things we plan to do a lot in the next probably few weeks,
in the next few weeks,
is we're going to start doing gear videos, gear reviews, and all kinds of things about just videos with us in it with gear, using it, showing it, doing the review. We'll be able to show you how the things we're talking about are gray.
Or not gray.
Or not gray. But most of what we talk about tends to lend itself towards gray, even if that gray it's a camping tool.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of gray items we'll be talking about, and then we'll even show you the not gray items and how they tend to go into bags or kits that are pretty gray.
Yep. And to kind of wrap up the show a little bit, and we hope we got you a little bit excited about some videos coming out, and you can finally see our ugly mugs on them.
Yep.
To make up for the chicken coop fiasco of last week, and y'all not getting a show, we're actually going to put out 2 shows this week. We had Ron Davis of EMS Newbie Podcast come back in, and he did some medical myths for us.
I think it was a fantastic show, and a lot of I think a lot of you will be laughing and learning a lot during the show.
Yeah. And that wraps up episode 19. Thank you for joining us. If you like the podcast, make sure to leave us a review in iTunes. It helps others find us. And if you didn't, well, use the feedback form on the site and tell us what you didn't like, why you didn't like it, and what we can do to improve. This show is for you, the listener. Be sure to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube through the links on the top right hand of the site at www.intherabbithole.com. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter by visiting our newsletter page. By connecting with us, you'll receive updates about the site and notifications of new articles and podcast episodes. That's right, we're not just a podcast. Every week, articles are posted to the site, intherabbithole.com, that cover all manner of topics relating to surviving in an urban environment, whether in good times or in extreme circumstances. And as a side note, lots of new articles coming out. We're ramping up production, boys and girls. Show notes with each episode are posted to the site where you can interact with us and pick up resources from the show. Till next time, stay safe and sound.